Welcome to Threadhead TV. This is Jude Bell. Thank you for joining me on today's episode where we take a pair of khaki pants and add a braided side panel. Another interesting trend that I wanted to try is the double waistband. I had two pairs of the same khakis and I incorporated both pairs into this project. Stay tuned. The very first step in this project is taking your pair of khakis and a seam ripper and undoing the outer side seam. This is something you can easily do while you watch Netflix or listen to an audiobook, but just be careful not to damage the fabric on the side seam. I'm going to use bias tape for my braids, and this is cut on the diagonal, which gives the fabric a little more stretch. And the reason why I want this is because I'm going to be turning the fabric into the braid and I want it more supple rather than bumpy. So I've made my strips 3 inches wide. I've pieced them together in order to make 3 different long bias tape strips of 135 inches. Anytime there's a seam like this, we will even up the edges. So I've already taken my bias tape and I've folded it in half the whole length of the bias tape and press so that I have a center line along my strip. Then the next step is to fold the edges to that center line and press all the way along your bias strips. Then you'll take that bias tape and fold it in half again and press all the way along the length so that all your raw edges are tucked inside. I did try braiding with a bias tape that had raw edges to see if I would like the braid with frayed edges look, but I didn't. Finished bias tape just makes a much more visually appealing braid for this project. We're going to cut off that tail, get rid of that, take the folded side, put it right along the edge there, and I'm going to 3, which is more like a top stitch. I'm taking the 3 strands and I'm just tacking them together at the top. Now you're ready for a braid. There are a few different ways you can do this, but I did mine loosely. I didn't want a really tight braid. 135 inches in length for this braid prior to braiding was enough for both sides of my pants, but of course it depends on how tall you are. I wanted my pants to sit higher up by my waist rather than low on the hips, so I'm using the trend of the double waistband to help me achieve that look. I happen to have 2 of the same pair of pants. I think I bought them in 2 different sizes, neither of which fit me anymore. So for me to try the double waistband trend, I think having identical waistbands is going to work better for me. But I'm just sticking a toe in the water on this trend. I really like it and I think it's here to stay. So I will make other double waistband projects, I have no doubt. And honestly, this is the beauty of sewing, is that you can take something that's already in your closet and make it into something new or update it. Isn't that great? And we can be about trends, but not about the fast fashion and throwing things away. Before attaching the 2 double waist layers, I want to cut away extra bulk on the inside. I took it to my serger and finished the raw edges here, which you can also do with the zigzag stitch on your regular machine. At this point, I put my walking foot on my machine because the braid is pretty bulky and it's going to go over that bulk beautifully. If you don't have a walking foot, I would recommend investing in one. They're expensive. It costs probably about $50, and they might, when I bought it, it's probably more expensive now, but it's worth it. When I first started sewing the braid on, I just went straight over the edges, but then I realized that going around the curve of each braid actually looks better. So that's what I did for most of this project. You will need to sew along the outer edge of both sides of the braid. And I used a 3 on my stitch length, which is it's a wider top stitch. Taking my back side and I'm top stitching on top of this side. The braid panel itself is made out of a 4-inch wide piece of fabric that was not cut on the bias. Again, I am using a top stitch of 3 here. I am also following in the ditch the stitching line that I tore out with my seam ripper. I am following that same exact seam line all along the edge. When you get to the bottom of your hem, you are just going to want to retrace the lines if you took out any stitching in the hem. And I did take out some stitching so that I could fold under my new side band in the same way that the original hem was folded. So I'm just retracing the manufacturer's seam at the hem. After top stitching one side, using the existing crease to top stitch along, I can see where my stitches were originally, and I followed that line on the top stitching in the prior step. And now you turn it inside out and right sides facing together. We will make our second seam. However, the double waistband will be left out for now. So you'll start your stitching below the double waistband from the inside. And you'll want your stitching to be right in the ditch there where the prior seam was. So here's the bottom on that side. This is how to finish off the bottom. I'm going to fold it, matching. We're going to cut this off, but right now I'm just going to tuck it in. And we are going to top stitch along here. This is really only possible with a walking foot. Just doesn't like how bulky that is. Sometimes you have to do it by hand. To reinforce the top of the side panel, I'm going to use an extra piece of bias tape and sew it along the upper edge. I picked out the waistband part that had been sewn because I'm going to have to alter the waist and make it smaller. It was too big around for me. So instead of having the panel at the top where the waistbands are equidistant all the way along, I'm going to have the waistbands actually meet at the top, so they will be layered on top of the braid in this way. And to finish off the very top section of the waistband, I sewed a little rectangle along the edge in order to reinforce it. At this point, it was having a hard time getting through the bulk of the waistband plus the bulk of the braid, so I had to hand crank the needle down in a few times. Sometimes you have to just pull it out and try it again at a different angle, so that's what I did. I started at the top of the waistband this time, and it seems to have worked okay. I flipped it around and sewed along that top edge one more time for reinforcement. Thanks so much for joining me on this braided side panel tutorial. I hope you'll join me again here at Threadhead TV.
If you've seen any braided fashion that you would want to see into a DIY, then just share it in the comments below. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.